This is the lecture for Ishmael section 3 and 4. And it opens up with a tape recorder, kind of the idea of hearing yourself and hearing how ridiculous we can sound sometimes when we step back and listen to ourselves with an open mind. And today we're going to be talking about the creation myth, or what he calls the creation myth. And you might expect this all of a sudden to go into religion and the Christian creation myth, or the Japanese creation myth, or the hundreds of creation myths that are all over the planet about, where we come from. But we're looking here at calling evolution a creation myth, and not because the facts aren't there to support the idea of very slow genetic change over time, or the way that we now know that planets form and our planets form, or how life functions. All these things, that are provided for us by fact. But Ishmael calls this creation story we have of evolution a myth, and not because it didn't happen that way, but because of the way we view the story of evolution, even though it's filled with actual facts. All right. So he gets kind of ill with him because he's not thinking. And he gets him to explain, essentially our creation myth, the way we believe the universe happened. And then he tells his own story, where it's the exact same evolutionary story, but instead of finally appeared humans, instead Ishmael says, and finally jellyfish appeared. And basically he uses this allegory where there's an anthropologist who's walking along before there was anything on the earth, before life left the oceans. And he comes to the edge of the ocean and he sees the most advanced life form at this time, in this allegory. And it's a jellyfish. And he asks the jellyfish for his creation story, and he tells the exact same one our narrator said about, how planets smashed into each other, and, the moon and the earth were two planetoids that collided, and, that's why half of the moon is made of stuff from the earth, and the earth has parts of the moon, and how planets form and all this. He goes into all that stuff, their evolution, and then he ends it with, and finally we jellyfish appeared. And so he's asking the narrator, look, what do you think about this? And basically the whole point of this thing is that what's mythological about our creation story is that, like the most horrible sin in the Bible, the one that starts all evil, vanity, we are vain and think that we are the height of evolution, that nothing else out there is beyond us. In the infinity that is the universe, that it's all for us. It's all about me. Me. I'm so special as a human that they made the whole universe. It's all for me. Even though I'll never leave the planet, it's all out there just for me. Because I'm the best that ever happened. Because I'm a human. And this is a major flaw. Even if you're a very religious person, for instance, Christian, Job chapter 41 makes it very clear that we are not the pinnacle of God's creations. Even though we've told ourselves that we are, he actually has an entire list of creatures that he invented in the old days that are more than us. He describes a great Leviathan that lives beneath the seas and all kinds of mythical creatures. And you're like, where the hell did this come from in the Bible? And that's part of Job's humility. He learns that humans are not the pinnacle of creation, but yet we've told ourselves that we are. And we've told ourselves that the Bible is all about us, that it's all about we are God's greatest creations, and it's all about us, the whole universe. Never actually says that. And this is what he's getting at as part of our story that we lie to ourselves about. The idea that everything in existence was all made for us. And this is a flaw in thinking, right? And so we put ourselves at the central event of human existence, of the existence of the universe. I mean, you think, remember, one of the reasons why I use this whole jellyfish who thinks that you fall off the edge of the world if you leave the ocean is because that's what we thought. We thought the world was flat. If you went to the edge, you'd fall off. We thought that we were the center of the universe, okay? And then we learned that wasn't true. And then we thought, oh, we're the center of this solar system. Then we know that isn't true. So we always try to make it about us. And I'll tell you a little secret. That came from civilization. Civilization wants us to think that. So people in power can convince us to do horrible things to the world and nature so they can get rich. Because they convince this is all ours. That it's ours and nothing else's. And that's a major flaw in our story. Okay? So basically the beginning of every story and the false one that we're living right now is here on this page. The beginning of the Tager story of our premise is the world was made for humans, or the world was made for man. Man being, at the time this was written, you refer to all humans in the male. It comes out of the Latin language. So sorry, ladies, but basically the world was made for humans. Okay, and you got to think about the ramifications of that. If you think that something belongs to you, I mean, it's easy to see how we could, how easily slavery can happen. The world belongs to us. So all we got to do is say, hey, you're not human, and I can enslave you, treat you however I want. Can treat all of nature however we want. Can treat the planet however we want. Because it was made for us. We can do whatever we please for it. And this is part of the problem of modern day religion, because modern day religion reinforces that because, mostly out of mistranslations from, the ancient Hebrew Bible. The ancient Hebrew Bible, which are all, well, I'm not a religious person, but for those of you who are in church, you've got a modern day Christian Bible, which is very much changed from the original that it's based on. And one of the things that's been changed is this. God gave the plants and animals of the world to humans to have dominion over. Now, I can prove to you that that's been changed because dominion is not a Hebrew word. That is a Roman word. And the Romans are these main guys that spread civilization and slavery all over the planet. So what is part of their story? The story is that we are masters of the world. Remember, dominus means slave master. So we have mastership of the whole world. Now, the original ancient Hebrew Bible, the word that's used in ancient Hebrew is more akin to shepherding over or having responsibility over, which is a very different word because, if you're a shepherd of a flock, you have to protect it. You have to maintain it. It gives you food and you provide it safety. But if it's just yours, like the Romans and they're your slaves, you can treat them however you want. Eventually the flock dies. Well, that's part of the problem, is that fault in thinking that we're not supposed to take care of the world, that it's ours, we can do whatever we want with, like some kind of petulant, spoiled child. Okay? Okay, now on to section 4. We got in the middle of the story. The world was made for us, and we can do whatever we want to it. Okay? So here we're going from the premise to the middle. Okay? Takes us a long time to figure out, what to do with the world. At some point, people decide to start agriculture. Now, we'll go into this a little bit later, but many of you probably think original sin is disobedience to God in the Old Testament. And look, I'm not religious, so I'm not trying to shove religion on you. It's just that the ancient Hebrew Bible, the Torah, the Quran, the Christian Bible, those Old Testament stories are some of the oldest we have in literature. I hate to tell you, but many of them were based on literature that comes 2,000 years earlier that was written specifically for entertainment. So many of the stories that we have in the Old Testament that we're like, oh, this is the truth, actually came from like a fiction novel that some people wrote on stone tablets for fun. So, you got to be careful how much you take seriously. But the important thing is they're all extremely old texts that have to do with some of the earliest aspects of human life on this planet that we know of, that we can communicate in language. And one of the things that you'll come to find out later on in class is that we actually kind of misunderstand the story of Adam and Eve. We'll get into it a little bit later, but basically, original sin in the story of Adam and Eve is actually civilization, and agriculture is one of the main things that you have to have for civilization to exist. In fact, it's the thing you have to have for civilization. And that's why, when God curses Adam and Eve, he says, you shall die, meaning you, plural, the human race, shall become extinct. Forever shall you toil in the soil, agriculture. Thistle and thorns will it sprout for you, and its bread will not nourish you. In other words, eventually agriculture and civilization will wipe you out. And I'll go into this a little bit later, but just trust me on that for now. So basically, you have the middle of the story. We started using agriculture. We started settling down, which created division of labor, which created power, which created surplus populations, which created masters and slaves, economic tension, drug use, alcohol abuse, all these bad things, armies, genocide, all these things that never existed before only start to exist because of agriculture and civilization. And that's the middle of the story. The world was made for us to use, and we can rule it. We must rule it and do whatever we want with it. Okay? So he gets into this idea here, and it's a central question. Why does the world need humans? Answer, it does not. The world doesn't need us. If we disappeared today, the world would be a better place. Nature would heal itself. The earth would continue on and on and on and on and on with life. So why does the world need us? The answer is it doesn't, but we've convinced ourselves that it does, that there's no meaning without us and our big religious stories to give the world meaning. In fact, we need the earth. We need the universe. We can't exist without them. But we've convinced ourselves the opposite. Now that's conveyed here by this idea that this guy's floating up in outer space looking down at humans, and without civilization the world is chaos. Well, that's one of the themes of this book, the idea of chaos and order. And actually, the world without civilization and humans is perfect order. Nature naturally finds order and balance. We are the ones who introduce chaos and destruction. But yet we've convinced ourselves that the jungle, the woods, all that stuff is chaos, and we have to put order or civilization on top of it when it's actually the exact opposite. So we have the beginning of the story, the world was made for man, and the middle of the story, and man was made to rule it. Okay? Now there's a big problem with that. Big problem with that. Because you got to think about, what does it mean to rule? So think about like a king. If a king from another country, a dictator, for instance, from some Middle Eastern country or whatever, invaded America, what would you do? Well, you would probably fight, right? I mean, I assume we would fight instead of become slaves or conquered. Okay, but that's what rulers do. Rulers conquer. And so if we lose to this tyrant who invades America and becomes president or king or whatever, and we don't do whatever he says, what does a king do? What does a dictator do? Well, he kills us. He tortures us. He kills us. And that metaphor is exactly what we have done. What do we always say? We have conquered the 7 seas. We've conquered the world. Now we're conquering outer space. To conquer is to rule, and if something doesn't do what you want, you kill it. Well, the problem with that is, if you rule the earth and try to conquer it, you will eventually kill it because it's not going to do what you want. And that's exactly why we're in the 6th great extinction of Earth right now. And if you don't believe that, guys, look, it's being taught in basic grade school books. Okay? More species have gone extinct in the last 100 years than have faster than ever before in any extinction event. You've been hearing about it probably since you were kids. I've been hearing my whole life how many thousands of species go extinct a day. I mean, literally millions of species a year go extinct. It's ridiculous. Okay. All right. So, in other words, to fulfill our destiny according to civilization as takers, we have to conquer everything. And the thing that he leaves off with in the last part of the lecture here is the idea of Achilles. And if you're not familiar with Achilles, then, go watch Troy with Brad Pitt or something. Jesus, read a book. But if you're not familiar with Achilles, he was a mythological figure that was invincible. His mother was a goddess, an oracle, that dipped him in the river Styx in the underworld. And that made Achilles invincible except for on his heel, his only weakness, which is the Achilles heel. So what's important about Achilles is his mother, the goddess, told him, look, you have a choice. You can stay right here in Greece, and you can marry and have kids, and you'll have a happy life here in Greece, and you'll have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and one day you'll die, and nobody will know who the hell you were, but you'll live a long, happy life, and your people will continue. Or you can go fight in this Trojan War where you will die and your bloodline will end, but you will be forever famous. Everyone will know you. 1,000 years later, kids in college class will have heard of you. And the metaphor here is, this is the choice that we have made as a species. We could have gone along on this earth, living in harmony with everything, but instead, we chose to make a bright flash, to make our mark, to scar the earth with the history of our presence. But soon, we probably won't exist here anymore, just like Achilles.